On a freezing winter morning, Officer Ryan Hale opened his cabin door expecting nothing more than fresh snow and silence. But instead, he froze. Right there on his wooden steps, a tiny puppy sat covered in snow, eyelashes frozen together, legs stiff, icicles hanging from his fur. The puppy didn't bark, didn't move. Ryan dropped to his knees. "What happened to you, buddy?" he whispered softly. Then the little dog slowly raised one trembling paw and placed it in the officer's hand as if begging for help. In that moment, Ryan felt something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a lost puppy. What Ryan discovered next would shock the entire town and change his life forever. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The mountains were silent that morning, far too silent even for winter. A thick blanket of snow covered everything in sight, smoothing out the rugged landscape and swallowing all color beneath a layer of relentless white. The sun hadn't risen yet, but a faint blue glow stretched across the sky, the kind that whispered warnings of another brutal storm on the way. Officer Ryan Hale stood by the frosted window of his remote wooden cabin, sipping steaming coffee and watching his own breath fog the glass from the inside. Even indoors, the cold felt alive, creeping through cracks like an unwelcome visitor. Ryan wasn't supposed to be here this long. The cabin had begun as a temporary escape, somewhere quiet enough to silence the noise in his head, far from the city, far from patrol cars, far from memories he still couldn't bear to say out loud. But winter had trapped him longer than expected, the roads half buried, the nearest town 20 miles away. It was peaceful, yes, but a dangerous kind of peace, the sort that felt too still, too empty, too heavy. He pulled on his boots and opened the cabin door to toss out ashes from last night's fire. The moment the door cracked open, a sharp blade of icy wind slashed across his face. Snowflakes spiraled wildly, dancing in a frantic storm that hadn't even begun yet. Ryan stepped outside, bracing against the cold, his breath forming thick clouds that vanished as quickly as they appeared. He glanced around, scanning the quiet forest bordering his cabin. Living in the mountains had trained him to recognize every sound, every rustle, every distant crack of ice. But today, nothing. Not a single bird, not a single branch movement, only the crunch of snow beneath his boots. Then he noticed something odd. His steps, or rather, someone else's. Right there on the wooden stairs leading up to his porch, the snow was disturbed. A small indentation. Then another. And another. Something had been there very recently. Something small. Something that shouldn't have survived more than a few minutes in this deadly cold. Ryan frowned, setting the metal ash bucket aside. He knelt, brushing away the loose powder to get a clearer look. Frozen crystals clung stubbornly to the wood, but he could still see the shape beneath. A tiny print. A paw, perhaps. Light, delicate, barely pressing into the snow. Too small for a wolf. Too small for a coyote. His heart nudged with concern, confusion swirling through him. Out here in this brutal cold, what creature could possibly survive long enough to leave such fragile prints right at his door? Ryan slowly rose to his feet, his eyes narrowing as he followed the tiny paw prints across the porch. They weren't scattered or wandering. They formed a trembling, uneven trail that led straight toward his door. The wind howled behind him, lashing icy flakes against his face, but he barely felt the cold now. Something had come here. Something small. Something desperate. He took one cautious step forward. Then he saw it. At first, it blended completely into the snowy steps, a motionless mound buried under frost. But as Ryan knelt closer, brushing away the powdery snow with trembling gloves, the shape sharpened. Soft fur stiffened with ice, tiny ears drooping. A fragile body curled tightly as if trying to fight the cold alone. It was a puppy. A tiny, frost-covered puppy sitting on his steps like a forgotten statue carved from winter itself. Icicles hung from his whiskers and tail, his fur frozen solid into icy spikes. Even his eyelashes were dusted with frost, giving his face an eerie, fragile stillness. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. "Oh God," he whispered. He leaned down slowly, afraid that even touching the little creature might cause it to shatter like thin glass. The puppy didn't move, didn't whine, didn't even seem to breathe. Only the faintest, shallow rise of his chest betrayed the miracle that he was somehow still alive. Ryan removed his glove and gently placed his bare hand on the puppy's head. The cold was immediate and biting, so intense it stung like fire. The pup's fur felt like solid ice, too cold, far too cold for any living thing. "You poor little guy," Ryan murmured. He slipped his hands under the tiny body, shocked at how light it was. Feather-light, weightless, a creature on the edge of disappearing. As he lifted the puppy, something unexpected happened. A tiny, trembling paw slipped out from beneath the frozen body and pressed weakly against Ryan's wrist. The gesture was so small, so fragile that it nearly shattered Ryan's composure. The pup was still fighting, still trying, still hoping someone would save him. "I've got you," Ryan whispered, his voice cracking. He cradled the freezing bundle against his chest, shielding him from the wind as he hurried toward the cabin door. Snow whipped around him like shards of glass, the storm intensifying with every step. The puppy's body shivered faintly, the first sign of life since Ryan had found him. Inside the cabin, warmth rushed outward as Ryan pushed open the door. He slammed it shut behind him, sealing the puppy away from the merciless cold. The tiny creature lay limp in his arms, frost melting into droplets that soaked through Ryan's shirt. "Hang on," Ryan breathed, moving quickly to the hearth. "You're safe now, I promise." He didn't even know the puppy's name, but somehow, in that moment, saving him felt like the only thing that mattered in the world. Ryan placed the frozen puppy gently on a thick wool blanket beside the crackling fireplace. The warmth radiating from the flames cast an orange glow across the tiny body, highlighting just how severe the frostbite was. Ice clung stubbornly to the pup's fur, melting in slow droplets that slid down his sides. His paws were stiff, curled inward as if locked in place. His breathing, although present, was shallow and uneven, barely lifting his small chest. Ryan's heart hammered with urgency. He had been trained for emergencies, battlefield injuries, even life-and-death canine situations. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of this helpless little creature slowly fading right in front of him. "Come on, buddy," he murmured, his voice trembling. "Stay with me." He grabbed a second blanket, wrapping it tightly around the puppy to trap the warmth. Then he filled a bowl with lukewarm water, not too hot, just warm enough to help raise body temperature without shocking the pup's fragile system. Carefully, he dipped the pup's paws into the water, massaging them gently to encourage blood flow. The puppy flinched weakly. It wasn't much, but it was something. "That's it," Ryan encouraged softly. He worked tirelessly, rubbing life into the pup's frozen limbs, rotating between blankets and warm water. Every minute felt like an hour. The storm outside raged violently, rattling the cabin windows, but Ryan didn't look away, not even for a second. The pup let out the faintest whimper. Ryan exhaled shakily. "Good, good, you're fighting." He dried the little dog's paws and held him closer to the fireplace, making sure not to overheat him. His hands trembled as he checked the pup's heartbeat again. Fast, weak, but still there. Still fighting. Ryan brushed a thumb gently over the puppy's tiny ear, now softening as the ice melted away. "You're tougher than you look," he whispered. A memory flashed through his mind. Another small creature relying on him. Another cold night. Another desperate moment. His throat tightened, but he pushed the emotion down. This wasn't the time to break. After several long minutes, the puppy's body gave a small, involuntary shudder. Ryan froze. Then the pup's chest rose slightly deeper than before. One breath, then another. The improvement was tiny, but unmistakable. Ryan felt relief wash over him like warm water. "That's it. You're coming back," he breathed. Still, the puppy remained dangerously weak. His eyes stayed closed, his body limp except for occasional tremors. Ryan knew this was just the beginning. Saving him would require more than warmth. It would require strength from both of them. For a long moment, the cabin felt suspended in silence. Nothing but the crackling of the fire and the soft rasp of the puppy's shallow breaths. Ryan hovered close, refusing to blink, afraid that if he looked away for even a second, the fragile spark of life in the tiny creature might fade again. He kept rubbing the puppy's sides gently, trying to spread warmth through the stiff, icy fur. Then, without warning, the puppy's tiny body twitched. At first, Ryan thought it might be an involuntary reaction from the cold, but then the pup's hind legs stretched slightly, weak, trembling, but purposeful. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He leaned in closer, eyes wide with hope. "Easy, easy," he whispered, as if afraid his voice alone might scare the little creature back into stillness. Gradually, the puppy's head shifted a fraction of an inch. His ears twitched, barely perceptible, but enough to send a surge of relief flooding through Ryan's chest. The pup's chin lifted a little, as though he were trying to fight his own heavy exhaustion. Frost melted from his whiskers, dripping onto the blanket in tiny, glistening droplets. Then came the sound. A faint, broken whimper, thin, but unmistakably alive. Ryan closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. The sound reminded him of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. He placed his hand gently beneath the puppy's head, supporting it as the little dog attempted to move again. The puppy's paw, still stiff but warming, slid forward and landed weakly against Ryan's thumb. "You're still with me," Ryan murmured, voice soft and full of awe. "Good. Keep fighting." The pup's eyelids fluttered, not fully, just enough for faint slivers of dark, glassy pupils to appear before closing again. It was as if he were trying to wake up, but didn't have the strength yet. Ryan brushed a gentle finger over the top of the tiny head. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe." He adjusted the blanket, wrapping it more securely around the pup's small frame. The firelight reflected in the melting patches of fur, giving the dog's body a soft shine that hadn't been there earlier. Another long breath escaped the puppy, this one steadier than the last. Little by little, life was returning. But Ryan's relief lasted only a moment before a new worry took hold. The puppy's breaths remained uneven. His heart, though beating, felt irregular beneath Ryan's fingertips. Something wasn't right. The cold alone couldn't explain everything. And deep inside, Ryan sensed there was more to this puppy story than a simple winter accident. The puppy's fragile breaths echoed softly in the warm cabin, but Ryan's mind drifted far from the mountains. As he knelt beside the tiny creature, warming him with gentle hands, memories, once he had tried desperately to bury, rose uninvited from the depths of his past. Years ago, Ryan Hale wasn't a man hiding in the cold. He was a decorated K-9 officer. He and his partner, a fearless German shepherd named Shadow, had been inseparable. They trained together, lived together, trusted each other with their lives. Shadow wasn't just a partner. He was family, a brother, the one constant presence in Ryan's otherwise chaotic life as a police officer. But one night changed everything. Ryan could still smell the gasoline, the burning rubber, the screams. They had been responding to a call about a wanted suspect hiding near an abandoned warehouse. The air was thick with tension, the kind that prickled Ryan's skin even before they entered the shadows. Shadow had sensed it, too. His ears stiff, his stance rigid, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The explosion came without warning. A trap. A deafening blast tore through the building, sending Ryan and Shadow tumbling through smoke and shrapnel. Ryan remembered clawing his way through the wreckage, coughing, blinded, heart pounding. He remembered hearing Shadows whine somewhere in the collapsing structure. He remembered dragging himself toward the sound, ignoring pain, ignoring fear, but he hadn't been fast enough. Shadow had shielded him, taken the worst of the impact. Ryan had lived. Shadow hadn't. The guilt had consumed him, hollowed him out, stripped the color from his world. The department praised his bravery, but their words felt empty. His badge felt heavier than ever. Every street corner, every patrol route, every barking dog reminded him of the partner he failed to save. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. He left the city, bought a cabin deep in the mountains, and disappeared from the life he once knew. He told himself he needed space. He told everyone he needed quiet. But deep inside, Ryan knew the truth. He was running from the memories, the guilt, the silence left behind by Shadow's absence. Ryan swallowed hard, returning to the present as the puppy twitched weakly beside the fire. The sight of the small, struggling dog stirred something inside him. A wound he thought had sealed long ago. He wasn't just fighting to save a life. He was fighting a ghost from his past. And somehow, this tiny, frozen puppy had walked straight into the one place Ryan thought he had successfully shut forever. The fire crackled softly, filling the cabin with warm light, but Ryan's unease grew with every passing minute. At first, the puppy's trembling had felt like a hopeful sign, his body fighting to warm itself, to survive. But soon, the shivers changed. They became harsher, almost violent, as if the little dog's body were losing the energy to keep itself alive. Ryan knelt closer, placing a steady hand over the puppy's chest. The heartbeat he'd felt earlier, fast, weak, but present, was becoming harder to track. It fluttered irregularly, skipping beats, fading for moments that felt far too long. "Come on, buddy. Stay with me," he whispered. He wrapped the blanket tighter and held the puppy against his chest, hoping his own body heat might help. The pup's head rested limply against Ryan's arm, his eyelids flickering weakly as though he were drifting in and out of consciousness. Then, suddenly, the puppy let out a small, broken yelp, barely audible, but filled with pain. Ryan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just hypothermia. Something else was wrong, something deeper, something that went beyond the cold storm outside. He grabbed his phone and dialed the nearest veterinary clinic, but the call didn't even connect. The storm had already taken out most communication lines the night before. He tried again. Nothing. No signal. No hope of immediate help. "Damn it," Ryan muttered, pacing anxiously as the wind howled outside. He knew the nearest town was a long, treacherous drive away, even in good weather. But now, the snowstorm was intensifying, drenching the mountains in white chaos. The roads were already buried, and even with four-wheel drive, the chances of making it were dangerously low. He returned to the puppy, kneeling as the little dog's body jerked once more, this time weaker, slower. "You're not dying on me." "Not today," Ryan said through gritted teeth. He rushed to the kitchen, grabbing whatever supplies he could find. Towels, warm water bottles, even an old first aid kit he used to keep for K9 emergencies. He placed the warmed bottles around the puppy, creating a cocoon of gentle heat. The pup whimpered faintly, his tiny body twitching in response, but his breathing was getting worse. Each inhale came with a faint rasp, each exhale weaker than the last. His tiny mouth opened slightly, as though he were trying desperately to pull air into lungs that didn't want to work anymore. Ryan pressed his fingers gently against the pup's rib cage again. The heartbeat was fading, thinning into a soft, uneven rhythm that scared him more than he dared to admit. A wave of fear surged through him. Not again. Not another life slipping away in his arms. He couldn't bear it. Not after Shadow. He leaned close, voice cracking with desperation. "Stay with me, little guy. Fight. Just fight." But as the storm screamed against the windows and the fire hissed in the stone hearth, Ryan watched the puppy's chest rise and then fall. Too slowly. Too weakly. Time was running out. Ryan worked with frantic hands, massaging the puppy's frail limbs, whispering encouragements he wasn't sure the little dog could even hear. Every few seconds he checked the rise and fall of the puppy's chest, terrified that at any moment it might stop altogether. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the cabin walls as if nature itself were warning him that time was slipping away. He grabbed a soft cloth and began gently drying the pup's fur, hoping to remove the last bits of melted frost. But as he pressed the cloth against the dog's neck, his fingers brushed against something stiff, something that didn't feel like fur or ice. Ryan froze. Very carefully, he lifted the pup's head and tilted it slightly. Hidden beneath a thick layer of frost and tangled fur was a collar. Not a store-bought one. This was worn, frayed with patches of leather peeling away, and attached to it was a small metal tag, cracked down the middle as though it had been struck or smashed. He leaned closer. The tag wasn't just cracked, it was burned on one side. "What happened to you?" Ryan whispered. He scraped gently at the frost covering the metal, uncovering more disturbing signs. The collar had deep scratches along its length, marks that looked too deliberate to be from simple wear. Not bite marks, not from another animal. These scratches were sharp, uneven, like something had clawed or ripped at it. As the last bit of ice melted off the puppy's side, Ryan noticed something else. Barely visible beneath the fur, faint reddish lines along the ribs. They weren't fresh enough to bleed, but they were unmistakably injuries. Scraping injuries. Ones that shouldn't be on a puppy this small. His chest tightened. Cold alone hadn't brought this pup to his doorstep. Someone or something had hurt him long before the snow ever touched his fur. He examined the broken tag again. The numbers were smudged, half missing, but one detail stood out. A tiny embedded tracker chip slot on the side of the tag. The chip was gone, scratched out, removed. Who would remove a tracker from a puppy? Ryan muttered. He looked toward the frosted window, dread crawling slowly up his spine. The little paw prints outside hadn't wandered aimlessly. They had been direct, purposeful, heading straight to his cabin, as if the puppy had been running from something or someone. And as the storm howled like a warning outside, Ryan realized the tiny creature shivering beside his fire wasn't just a victim of winter. He was a survivor of something far darker, something that might still be out there. The wind outside had turned vicious. Snow slammed against the windows in furious waves, the storm growing into a beast that clawed at the cabin from every direction. Ryan glanced toward the door, half convinced the next gust would rip it clean off its hinges. The mountains were unforgiving on ordinary days, but tonight they felt hostile, alive, and merciless. He checked the puppy again. The little dog lay curled in the blankets, his breathing still shallow but steadier than before. Tiny droplets of melted frost clung to his fur, reflecting the flickering firelight like crystals. Ryan adjusted the warm water bottles around him and added another log to the fire, watching the flames swell higher. The power suddenly flickered. The lights dimmed, buzzed, then steadied. Ryan tensed. Out here the electricity ran through old lines that had survived far too many winters. A bad storm could knock them out for hours, sometimes days. And losing heat now, he didn't even want to imagine what that would mean for the fragile puppy fighting for his life. Not tonight, Ryan muttered under his breath. Come on, hold together. The wind answered with a violent howl, slamming against the cabin walls. Snow seeped through the cracks of the window frame, sprinkling the wooden floor. Ryan grabbed a towel and pressed it against the draft, sealing it as best as he could. The temperature inside dipped, a subtle but noticeable change. The puppy whimpered. Ryan immediately returned to his side, placing a reassuring hand over the tiny chest. It's all right, he murmured softly. You're safe. I won't let anything happen to you. But even as he spoke the words, a cold knot tightened in his stomach. He knew the truth. Out here safety was fragile. Heat was fragile. Life itself was fragile. The lights flickered again. This time they went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room in an instant, broken only by the orange glow of the fireplace. Shadows danced across the walls, stretching long and thin, weaving through the dim cabin like restless spirits. The storm roared louder, furious, as if celebrating the moment it had trapped them in isolation. Ryan grabbed a lantern, lit it, and set it beside the puppy. The steady yellow glow illuminated the little dog's delicate face. His breaths came in a shaky little rhythm, but his chest moved. Slow but alive. Good, Ryan whispered. Stay with me. The storm battered the cabin relentlessly. The road was impassable. Communication was gone. Power was out. No help was coming. It was just the two of them now. A man haunted by his past, and a tiny puppy with secrets frozen beneath his fur, trapped together against the cold, the storm, and whatever had driven the little dog to Ryan's door. Hours crawled by under the storm's unrelenting assault. The fire burned steadily, but Ryan's nerves stayed tight as wire. He hadn't moved far from the puppy, afraid the little creature's life might slip away the moment he blinked. Every few minutes he checked the pup's breathing, his heartbeat, his temperature. Slow, weak, but alive. The wind shrieked against the walls. Snow hissed against the door. The storm showed no mercy. Ryan leaned back, rubbing his eyes. Exhaustion tugged at him, but he refused to rest. Not while the puppy fought so hard to hold on. Then suddenly, a sound. A soft, strained whine. Ryan's eyes snapped open. The puppy was stirring. At first it was just a tremor of movement beneath the blanket. Then a small paw pushed weakly outward, trembling as it tried to escape the folds of fabric. Ryan leaned forward, gently lifting the edge of the blanket. Hey, easy, little guy, he murmured. The puppy's eyes flickered open for the first time, dark, glassy, full of confusion and pain. But there was something else in them, too. Intent. The pup struggled, attempting to rise. His legs wobbled violently, nearly collapsing beneath him. Ryan steadied him with both hands. No, you're not strong enough yet. But the puppy didn't stop. He pushed forward again, then again, turning his head toward the door as though drawn by some invisible force. His breaths were shallow, but his determination was unmistakable. He lifted his paw and tapped weakly at Ryan's wrist. Ryan frowned. What is it? You want something?" The puppy gave a faint whimper and looked again at the cabin door. This time he tried to walk toward it, only to stumble into Ryan's arms. Ryan caught him gently, holding him against his chest. "You can barely stand," Ryan whispered. What could be so important? The puppy's small body shivered, but he turned his head once more toward the entrance, scratching feebly at Ryan's sleeve as if begging. A chill, different from the cold, ran down Ryan's spine. The little dog wasn't just restless. He was trying to tell him something. "All right," Ryan breathed. "Let's see what you're trying to show me." He wrapped the puppy carefully in a blanket and stood, cradling the fragile bundle close to his chest. The storm roared as he approached the door. When he cracked it open, the wind nearly ripped it from his grasp. Snow blasted inside, swirling across the wooden floor. The puppy let out a soft but urgent whine. Ryan followed the dog's gaze downward. There, half buried in the snow, was a faint trail. Tiny paw prints, partly erased by the storm, but still visible enough to trace. They led away from the cabin steps, straight into the dark forest beyond. Ryan's heart pounded. Someone or something was out there, and the puppy desperately wanted him to find it. The wind sliced across Ryan's face the moment he stepped outside, icy needles stinging his skin. He tightened his grip on the puppy, who whimpered softly beneath the blanket but continued staring ahead with surprising determination. Snowflakes whirled wildly under the lantern's glow, creating ghostly spirals that danced just out of reach. Ryan stepped carefully onto the porch, his boots sinking into the deepening snow. The air tasted metallic, sharp with storm and cold. His breath fogged in front of him as he bent down, raising the lantern to illuminate the faint trail. There it was. The paw prints he'd noticed earlier, small, delicate, barely pressing into the surface, continued down the steps and out into the wild. Some prints were nearly gone, erased by the storm's violence, but enough remained for him to trace their direction. The puppy nudged his arm weakly, urging him on. "All right," Ryan whispered. "Show me." He descended the steps, the wood creaking beneath the weight of packed ice. Once at ground level, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. The paw prints weren't the only marks in the snow. Beside them, a second trail, large, deep, methodical boot prints. Ryan stiffened, his pulse quickening. These weren't the tracks of a lost hiker or a passerby. The stride was steady, confident, not the shaky steps of someone struggling through a storm. Whoever it was had walked with purpose, and they had walked beside the puppy. A knot formed in Ryan's chest. "Someone was with you," he murmured to the little dog. The puppy whimpered in reply, burrowing slightly deeper into the blanket as though the memory frightened him. Ryan raised the lantern higher, its warm glow reaching the tree line. The storm swallowed the light quickly, but he could still make out the shapes of towering pines bowing beneath the weight of fresh snow. The trail, both the paw prints and the boot prints, vanished into the forest. The sight sent a chill deeper than any winter wind down Ryan's spine. Why would someone bring a puppy out here, in this storm, this far from town? And worse, why abandon him near Ryan's cabin? He knelt briefly, letting the lantern illuminate the snow more clearly. At several points, the boot prints seemed to stop, shuffle, then continue, as if the person had paused, maybe to pick something up or drop something, or struggle with something. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Ryan straightened and glanced down at the puppy. The little dog stared back at him with pleading, terrified eyes as though begging him not to follow the trail. "It's okay," Ryan whispered. "I won't let anything hurt you." But he couldn't ignore the truth. The puppy had led him here for a reason, and whatever happened in that forest was far from over. With one last look at the swirling storm above, Ryan stepped forward, lantern in hand, and followed the trail into the darkness. The deeper Ryan followed the trail, the quieter the forest became. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. Snow smothered every sound except the crunch of his boots and the faint, uneven breaths of the puppy tucked against his chest. The lantern flickered wildly in the wind, casting trembling beams of gold across the white wilderness. After several minutes, the paw prints began to weaken, fewer, more scattered, as if the puppy had stumbled, slowed, fought to keep going. But the boot prints beside them only grew heavier, deeper, the spacing between each step steady and controlled. Ryan's jaw tightened. Whoever had been here wasn't lost. They weren't struggling. They were working. The forest opened slightly into a narrow clearing. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a snow-covered patch of ground surrounded by thick pines. But then the lantern light passed over something sharp, unnatural. A metal corner. Ryan stepped closer. Beneath a thin blanket of snow lay a crate, a large one. Its wooden slats cracked, its metal hinges rusted. Snow had packed into the gaps, but Ryan could still see claw marks gouged into the wood. Long, desperate, violent. "What in the world?" he whispered. He knelt, brushing snow aside. Inside the crate were scraps of shredded fabric, bits of broken rope, and, Ryan's stomach twisted, a few pieces of torn leather that looked disturbingly similar to the puppy's collar. The puppy whimpered softly, burying his face deeper into the blanket. Ryan swallowed hard. He lifted more snow away and uncovered something else. A second crate, smaller, flipped on its side. The wood had splintered outward as if something had forced its way out or been kicked violently from the inside. And then he saw the marks. Tiny paw prints, not just one set. Many, far more than the single trail he had followed. The realization hit Ryan like a blow. This wasn't a random abandoned crate. It was part of something much bigger. He stood, scanning the clearing with new urgency. More disturbed snow near the tree line. A piece of plastic fencing buried under ice. The faint scent of gasoline carried on the wind. He had seen setups like this before. Makeshift containment sites used by illegal breeders or traffickers trying to move animals under the radar. But never out here. Never in the mountains. Never in a storm this deadly. "Someone used this place recently," Ryan muttered, "and they didn't want to be found." He looked down at the puppy. The little dog trembled, not from cold, but from fear. His injuries suddenly made sense. The scratches on the collar, the missing tracker chip slot, the wounds hidden under his fur. Someone had tried to get rid of him, erase him, leave him to die in the storm. Ryan's eyes hardened. "No," he whispered, "not anymore." The puppy lifted his head weakly, pressing his nose against Ryan's chest. Whatever darkness lay behind these crates, Ryan knew one thing for certain. He wasn't walking away. The cold bit deeper as Ryan stood in the clearing, lantern trembling in his hand. The crates, the claw marks, the torn rope, everything pointed to a chilling truth he couldn't ignore. Someone had been transporting animals illegally and had abandoned them when the storm turned brutal. The puppy in his arms wasn't the only victim. Ryan lifted the lantern higher, scanning the edges of the clearing. Snow drifted in thick waves, settling over everything like a burial shroud. But then, the faintest sound reached his ears. A whimper. Soft, weak, but unmistakable. Ryan's heart lurched. He spun toward the sound, holding his breath. For a moment, only the wind answered. Then it came again, quieter, strained, desperate. He moved quickly, shielding the lantern from the wind as he followed the noise to a dense patch of pine trees. The branches were heavy with snow, sagging low enough to brush against his shoulders as he pushed through. The ground dipped slightly, forming a small hollow beneath the trees. And there, huddled in the snow, were two more puppies. They were barely visible, their bodies half buried beneath a pile of fallen branches. Their fur was soaked and matted, frost clinging to their paws. One pup lifted his head weakly at Ryan's approach, but the other didn't move at all. "Oh God," Ryan breathed. "Hold on." With one arm, he held the first puppy tight against his chest, and with the other, he cleared away the branches. The tiny dogs were ice cold, their breathing faint, their eyes half shut. He knew the signs. They were minutes from slipping away. "No time," Ryan whispered, voice tight. No hesitation. He scooped the two additional puppies into his jacket, pressing them against his body for warmth. The weight was barely noticeable, but the responsibility felt enormous. 3 fragile lives now depended entirely on him. The storm roared louder, slamming branches against one another, howling through the trees like an angry beast. Snow began to collapse from the canopy overhead, falling in heavy chunks. Ryan ducked instinctively, nearly losing balance. "We're getting out of here," he muttered. "All of us." He turned back toward the path, but the tracks he'd followed were already fading, swallowed by fresh snow. Visibility dropped to just a few feet. The lantern flickered dangerously. If it went out, he'd be lost. If he got turned around, the puppies wouldn't survive. If he fell, no one would find them until spring. Ryan tightened his grip around all 3 puppies, pulling them close to his chest. Stay with me, he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he said it to them or himself. With unbelievable force, the wind slammed across the clearing, knocking him to one knee in the snow. Pain shot through his leg, but he pushed himself up without hesitation. There was no room for weakness. Not now. He battled the storm step by step, every movement deliberate, focused, fierce. He would not lose them. Not tonight. Not ever. The storm was merciless. Wind slashed against Ryan's coat, shoving him sideways as he trudged through the deepening snow with 3 tiny lives pressed against his chest. The lantern's flame guttered violently, threatening to die any second. Ryan kept one hand wrapped around it, shielding it from the blinding gusts. Without it, the forest would swallow him whole. His muscles strained with each step. His breath came in sharp, stinging bursts. The cold gnawed at him, seeping through every layer of clothing. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew he was pushing his limits. The mountain didn't forgive mistakes. Not in a storm like this. Almost there, he panted. But the storm grew louder, heavier, as if it were determined to erase every trace of his path home. The ground shifted beneath his feet. Snow drifts were forming faster than he could navigate. The lantern flickered again, this time dangerously low. Ryan took another step, and the world vanished beneath him. The snow collapsed into a hidden ravine, swallowing his leg and yanking him violently downward. His knee slammed against a jagged rock, sending a bolt of pain up his thigh. He cried out instinctively, clutching the puppies tighter, twisting his body so they wouldn't be crushed beneath him as he hit the ground. He landed hard on his side. The lantern flew from his hand. The flames snuffed out instantly. Darkness engulfed him. Snow stung his eyes. His breath turned ragged. Pain radiated from his injured leg. He tried to push himself up, but collapsed again. The cold seeped deeper, numbing his fingers. The world spun in icy, disorienting circles. No, not now, he gasped, clutching the pups close. Stay awake. Come on, stay awake. Then a small movement. The first puppy, the one who had led him out into the storm, squirmed weakly against his chest. The little dog pushed his head upward, pressing his nose against Ryan's chin. Then he wriggled free just enough to slide out of Ryan's arms and stumble into the snow. Wait. No. Come back. Ryan tried to grab him, but the pain in his leg forced him down again. The puppy didn't run away. He barked. A tiny, broken bark, barely audible over the storm, but sharp enough to cut through the chaos. Then he barked again, and again, each bark stronger than the last. Ryan realized what he was doing. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't lost. He was calling for help. Through the blizzard, through the suffocating dark, the little puppy stood his ground, barking with everything he had left. A beacon of life in the deadliest storm of the year. And in the distance, through the shrieking wind, Ryan heard voices. Someone had heard the puppy. The little dog had just saved his life. Blurred shapes moved through the storm as voices grew louder, clearer. Ryan blinked against the swirling snow, forcing his eyes to stay open. 2 figures emerged from the blizzard, mountain rescue volunteers who had been patrolling the ridge after reports of missing hikers. Their headlights cut through the darkness like lifelines. There, one shouted. Over here. Strong hands lifted Ryan from the snow while another rescuer gently gathered the 2 unconscious puppies from his arms. The first puppy, the brave one, stumbled toward the rescuers, letting out another weak bark before collapsing safely into gloved hands. Ryan tried to speak, but his voice cracked beneath the cold. Help! The pups. We've got them, the rescuer assured him. You're safe. Just hold on. They carried everyone back to a heated snowcat vehicle. The warmth inside flooded Ryan's frozen limbs with aching relief. Paramedics wrapped blankets around him and immediately examined the puppies, checking their vitals, rubbing their tiny bodies, warming them with heating pads. All 3 were critical, but alive. Hours later, Ryan woke in a hospital bed. The storm had finally quieted outside. His leg was bandaged, his body bruised, but he was breathing, warm and safe. A nurse entered the room with a soft smile. I figured you'd want an update, she said. The puppies are stable. Weak, but they're fighters. Ryan exhaled, sinking back into his pillow as tension he hadn't noticed unwound from his shoulders. They survived, he whispered. Thanks to you, the nurse replied. And thanks to one very loud little dog. Before he could respond, The door opened again, and a sheriff stepped inside, holding a folder thick with photographs. Officer Hale, the sheriff greeted him, recognizing him from his law enforcement background. We investigated the area you were found in. He set the folder on Ryan's bedside table and opened it. Photos of the crates, the claw marks, the torn leather, evidence bags containing pieces of rope, and a burnt tracking tag. Looks like an illegal breeder was moving animals through the mountains, the sheriff explained. When the storm hit, they panicked, dumped the crates, left the animals to die. Ryan's jaw tightened. Cowards. But they made a mistake, the sheriff continued. One of the puppies escaped, made it to your cabin, led you to the others. He closed the folder with a determined click. We're going after the people responsible. Ryan nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of everything that had happened. Shadows of his past, of Shadow, lingered in his chest. But something felt different now. Lighter, warmer, healing. This time he hadn't lost them. This time he had saved them. And they had saved him, too. 2 days later, the storm had finally lifted, leaving the mountains wrapped in a white glow that shimmered beneath the pale morning sun. Ryan stepped out of the hospital with a slight limp, his injured leg still stiff beneath the bandages. But the cold air no longer felt empty or harsh. It felt peaceful. Inside the small veterinary cabin connected to the hospital, 3 tiny puppies lay bundled together in a heated enclosure. Their fur was clean, soft, and warm again. Their breathing steady, their eyes bright with life. And when Ryan stepped into the room, all 3 perked up instantly. Especially the first puppy, the one who had crawled to his porch, the one who had barked for help in the storm, the one who refused to let him die. The little dog wobbled to his feet and pressed his nose against the glass, tail tapping weakly against the blanket. Ryan's chest tightened with emotion. The vet, an older man with gentle eyes, walked up beside him. He's been waiting for you, he said with a small smile. All of them have, honestly. But that one, I've never seen a puppy fight so hard. Ryan knelt, placing his palm against the glass. The puppy pressed his paw to the same spot, tiny pads meeting Ryan's warm skin through the barrier. He saved my life, Ryan murmured. And you saved his, the vet replied. You saved all of them. Silence settled between them, soft and meaningful. You know, the vet continued, they're healthy enough to be released in a few days. They'll need homes. Real ones. Safe ones. Ryan looked down at the puppy, at the fragile creature who had crawled through a storm and a nightmare of his own to reach safety. A creature who had fought harder than most humans ever would. A creature who reminded him of Shadow. Not the pain, not the loss, but the loyalty, the courage, the hope. The puppy barked, a tiny, eager sound that echoed through the room like a question waiting for an answer. Ryan's throat tightened. He opened the enclosure carefully and lifted the small dog into his arms. The puppy curled against him instantly, nose buried in Ryan's jacket as if he had always belonged there. I think, Ryan whispered, you've already chosen your home, haven't you? The puppy whimpered happily. The vet smiled. So, you're adopting him? Ryan nodded slowly, feeling warmth bloom in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Yeah, he said softly. I am. He glanced down at the tiny survivor in his arms. Welcome home, buddy. The puppy licked his chin, tail wagging with new strength. And for the first time since losing Shadow, Ryan felt whole again. The story teaches us that compassion, courage, and responsibility can save lives in ways we never expect. Even the smallest, weakest creature can carry tremendous strength and purpose. Officer Ryan's willingness to help a helpless puppy reminds us that kindness should never be limited by fear, inconvenience, or personal pain. It also shows that healing often comes when we help others. Sometimes the lives we save end up saving us in return. The rescued puppy's bravery proves that hope can survive even the harshest storms. Together, they demonstrate that every life has value and every act of kindness matters.